Chapter 1529. Hearing this, Mrs. Raymond had the servants lift all the lids on the bowls. In an instant, extremely fascinating. The fragrance of the food filled the entire dining room. This is simply incredible. Mrs. Raymond looked at the table. The appearance of the food was fascinating. The dishes and exclaimed. Sophia was even more direct. She sniffed and directly gave Gushingin a thumbs up. Dear Deanna, I never knew that your cooking skills were so good. Although they hadn't eaten yet, they knew that the taste wouldn't be bad just by smelling the fragrance. It was already dinner time, so they naturally didn't delay any longer, and sat down to taste the food. In this world, there was no rule of not talking while eating, and the way they expressed their praise was by praising without hesitation. After Mrs. Raymond finished eating a piece of tofu, she smiled at Gushingin and said, Dear Deanna, I swear, this is the best food I've ever eaten in my life. Even the exclusive chef of the royal family doesn't have such good skills as you. Sophia didn't even taste a single dish, and she had to exclaim in admiration. Deanna, you're really too mean. You've never said that your cooking is so delicious. She pretended to be angry. Gushingin was helpless. Actually, I've only secretly tried to cook for myself before. This is the first time I've cooked for someone other than myself. After she finished speaking, Sophia sighed again, saying that she was so outstanding that she simply forced the mermaid to death. Although Raymond didn't praise her repeatedly like the other two, he didn't stop eating the dongzi, indicating his attitude. After eating, Gushingin and Sophia should go home. Mrs. Raymond pulled the two of them and said a few words. After repeatedly inviting them to come again, she let them leave. After leaving the door, Gushingin discovered that Earl Allen had been waiting there for a long time. Sophia walked to Earl Allen's side in 2 or 3 steps and turned around to wave at them with a smile. Allen came to pick me up, so I won't trouble your Excellency Marshal. Earl Allen also nodded at the two of them. Seeing that her fiancé had personally come to pick her up, Gushingin didn't say anything else and got into Raymond's hover car. The two of them sat quietly in the car. After a long time, Raymond broke the silence in the car. My mother likes you very much. Gushingin smiled and said, I like Auntie very much too. She's really a very charming woman. Raymond turned his head slightly to look at her. The petite girl sat on the soft seat. Her side profile looked peaceful and soft, making people unable to help but feel at ease. Raymond was slightly absent-minded. Don't be distracted. Are you still driving? And Jing turned around and smiled at him. Raymond's eyes darkened. It's okay, he said. I've set the autopilot mode. Gushingin. Alright, this world is more advanced. Then she met Raymond's focus gaze. Raymond's Adam's apple. He looked at Gushingin and called softly, Deanna. Gushingin also responded softly. The atmosphere in the car suddenly became entangled. Ambiguous. Raymond looked at her and said, Have I never spoken to you formally? Gushingin tilted her head and looked at him. What? I like you. Chapter 1530. Gushingin felt that the whole world suddenly quieted down. In fact, the carriage had always been very quiet. But that kind of silence was completely different from the silence at this moment. At this moment, Gushingin could clearly hear the sound of her own breathing and heartbeat. Bang, bang, bang. She raised her eyes. The man sitting opposite her was looking at her without blinking. His expression was already calm. If she didn't hear it with her own ears, it would be hard to imagine that such a cold man had just confessed to her. Gushingin tilted her head, suddenly reached out her hand and put it on Raymond's chest. Raymond's body trembled. For soldiers like him, the body's defensive awareness was almost instinctive, not to mention a vital part like the heart being touched. But Raymond's body only trembled a little. And then he didn't make any extra movements. He let Gushingin put her hands on his heart. At this distance, if the person in front of him had any bad intentions, no matter how fast his reaction was, he couldn't avoid it. He was willing to trust her with his life. Gushingin could clearly feel the strong beating of the heart under her hands. Completely different from the calm on the surface, his heart was beating very fast, reflecting his inner world at this time. This man was nervous. It was for her. Gushingin suddenly laughed. Her blue eyes seemed to have fallen into a star in an instant, shining brightly. She gently leaned her head against his chest, the spot closest to his heart. Raymond suddenly felt a little helpless. He was so nervous that he didn't even know where to put his hands. He saw this petite and delicate mermaid gently leaning her head against his chest. It was obviously very light, but he actually felt breathless for a moment. Then, he heard a low voice coming from his heart. Yes, I can hear it now. Ecstasy. Even when His Majesty appointed him as the youngest marshal in the history of the Queso Empire, Raymond wasn't as excited as he was now. He looked at the neon lights and buildings flashing by outside, and a thought flashed through his mind. This wasn't a dream. Yes. He had never had such a beautiful dream. For the first time, Raymond hoped that the imperial capital could be a little bigger, so that the hover car could go a little longer. He couldn't bear to part with the beautiful atmosphere at this moment. But the speed of the hover car was too fast, and soon they arrived in front of the Leonard family's mansion. No matter how unwilling Raymond was, he could only silently send Gu Xingyin off the car, and then follow her in. When Gu Xingyin was about to walk in, she suddenly looked back at him. The man was still standing there expressionlessly, but Gu Xingyin saw the word unhappy on his face. She thought for a moment, then suddenly trotted towards Raymond. Just as Redmond was immersed in his own disappointment, he saw the petite figure running towards him. Then he noticed a movement on his face. Something warm touched the left side of his face lightly, and it was gone as soon as it touched him. But this was enough for him to freeze. Gu Xingyin blushed and said calmly, I just remembered. I forgot to tell you. I like you, Cager. Chapter 1531. Burton instantly forgot that he used to be Raymond's admirer. This brat, not only did he steal my sister, he even dared to act like this? Deanna isn't a member of the Raymond family yet. With that thought in mind, Big Brother couldn't help but rub his sister's soft hair. Only then did he put down his hand in satisfaction. He turned around and looked at Raymond with a smile. Thank you, Marshal Raymond, for sending my sister home. But it's already late, so I won't ask you to come in. Raymond nodded coldly. It's fine. Burton immediately said. Then, goodbye, Marshal? Raymond glanced at him. He could roughly guess what his future brother-in-law was thinking. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who was obediently standing at the side, and softened his voice. I'll be leaving first, Deanna. Have a good rest. Gu Xingyin raised her head and looked at her stern-faced brother. She thought for a moment and replied, Good night, Cager. She thought that her answer was very official, but her brother's face still darkened because of her words. Raymond's mood improved when he heard the little mermaid's reply. Although there was still no expression on his face, the aura around him softened. After Raymond left, Burton looked at Gu Xingyin. Cager. He didn't expect that in such a short time, they would call each other so intimately. Burton felt a little sour in his heart. He knew that it was a good thing that Deanna and her future husband had a good relationship. However, Burton wasn't prepared for the fact that Deanna would become someone else's family so soon. He couldn't bear to blame his sister, so he vented all his dissatisfaction on Raymond. Deanna was so obedient, so Raymond must have forced her to call him that. Well, in a sense, that was indeed the case. The people in the military realized that the marshal was in a good mood recently. As the saying goes, people are in high spirits when faced with happy events. Ever since the news of the marshal finding his future partner spread, everyone could clearly feel the change in the marshal. It seemed that the marshal was very satisfied with the future marshal's wife, right? Almost everyone was giving the marshal their blessings. But there were exceptions. For example, Adjutant Yashi. It wasn't that he didn't wish the marshal well, but compared to this, he was more doubtful of life. His beautiful and lovely first love, Miss Leonard, might have become the princess consort. This news had already made him very sad. Who knew that things would take a turn? Miss Leonard would not become the princess consort. She would become his superior's wife. Originally, whether it was the princess consort or the marshal's wife, it didn't matter to Yashi. It had nothing to do with him anyway. However, Jackie would never forget how he had told his superior about his affection and infatuation with Miss Leonard in a dreamy tone. Heavens above. If it was Yashi himself, if there was a guy who didn't have eyes and kept talking about how much he loved his fiancée in front of him every day, he would definitely be annoyed. He would definitely teach him a lesson. No wonder he felt that the way the marshal looked at him was a little strange these days. He wondered if he could salvage the situation if he took the initiative to admit in front of the marshal that he only admired the beauty of the future marshal's wife. Chapter 1532. Raymond very keenly noticed that his adjutant Yashi's state was very strange. Occasionally, when he looked up, he could see Yashi secretly looking at him. Or when he called his name, Yashi would jump up like a cat whose tail was guessed. This made Raymond very puzzled. He was never a person who would hold himself back. So on this day, Raymond directly called his adjutant's name. Yashi. Yashi's heart trembled. Ah? Marshal, do you have something to say? He tried to find some clues from the marshal's face, but the result was obvious. After working under the marshal for so many years, he had never been able to guess the marshal's thoughts. Raymond quietly looked at Yashi. Yashi, it's not that I have something to say, but I want to ask you, what happened to you during this time? What happened? Yashi wanted to cry and hug his marshal's thigh. He wanted to swear to the heavens that he knew he was wrong and would never dare to think about the marshal's wife again. But he was afraid that he would be beaten to death. With the marshal's strength, he would be beaten to death in less than 5 minutes. Yashi could only calmly say, nothing happened. He saw Marshal Raymond's hands were crossed on the desk, his right index finger gently rubbing the back of his left hand. This was the marshal's expression when he was doubtful. He was doubting his own words. Raymond looked at Yashi who was standing in front of him and clearly didn't want to tell the truth. Yashi, as your boss, I have no interest in your personal matters, but you can't let any non-work related emotions affect official matters. Otherwise, I will question whether you have the ability to be a qualified adjutant. Actually, in all fairness, Raymond felt that his adjutant's ability at work was very satisfactory except for his personality, which sometimes made people think he was stupid. But this didn't mean that he could tolerate the other party without limit. What he said just now was more to give the other party a psychological pressure. He didn't have the intention to change his adjutant for the time being. But Yashi didn't think so. Especially when he was suppressing such a matter in his heart, and heard Raymond talking to him so seriously. Yashi's mind suddenly jumped, and he finally couldn't help but say the matter in his heart. Raymond. Yashi was still widening his eyes to express his determination. I'm serious, Your Excellency Marshal. I know I was wrong. I promise I won't think of Madame Marshal ever again. Redmond gritted his teeth. He didn't take this matter to heart. But when Yashi said it, it really made people feel that there was something different. However, he was not an unreasonable person. He glanced at Alexei. Just this one thing has made you so worried these days that you can't even do your job properly? Yashi lowered his head and didn't say anything. This was tacit agreement. Raymond continued. Are you afraid that I'll make things difficult for you if I feel uncomfortable? Jackie lowered his head even more. Raymond coldly snorted. So in your heart, I'm such an unreasonable person? After he said this, he didn't wait for Yashi's reaction and continued. Don't worry, I don't care about this kind of thing. Yashi let out a sigh of relief. His Excellency Marshal was a man of his words. If he said he didn't care, then he definitely wouldn't care. But he immediately heard his boss slowly say, Do you think that with a fiancé like me, she'll still look at you? 30 chapters. Please recommend me. Chapter 1533. Yashi. F***ck. Even if the person in front of me is my boss, he can easily kill me with one hand. But at this moment, I still can't help but want to wave my fist and tell him that a man's dignity is not so easy to offend. What does he mean by having a fiancé like me and still looking at you? This kind of blatant contempt, it's definitely not something that would come out from my usual boss. Yashi raised his head and glared at Raymond. Then he met his boss's icy cold gaze. Yashi was full of hot blood and anger. He shamefully cowered. Yashi finally walked out of Raymond's office with a pale face. When he went in, he was full of anxiety. Now that he was out, although the last stone in his heart had been removed, his mood was still not high. It hurt my self-esteem too much. Yashi thought with grief and indignation. I've been with Sir Marshall for so long. Even if it's the truth, can you not say it so bluntly? What he didn't know was that after he left, Raymond sat in a chair and showed a very faint smile. Brat, although I won't do this to you over such a small matter, I can still block your heart. Gu Xingyin, who was at home, strangely received a message. It was from Prince Jonathan, asking her to go out and meet him. The words on the other side were very sincere and polite, and Gu Xingyin couldn't find any suitable reason. She thought about it, sent a message to Raymond, and then got up and went out. Because of the last time she and Sophia were blocked outside, the Leonard family specially hired 2 bodyguards to protect Gu Xingyin when she went out. When she arrived at the agreed place, Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows in surprise. This was the place where she and Sophia met Prince Jonathan for the first time. What does he mean? Gu Xingyin told the bodyguard beside her to stand there and wait for her. Then, she walked towards Prince Jonathan. Today, Prince Jonathan was dressed very formally. The decent suit perfectly showed his elegant demeanor, and the exquisite sapphire cufflinks added a sense of dignity. Miss Leonard. He looked at her with a smile. Because they were outside, Gu Xingyin only nodded at him. It's inconvenient to salute outside. I hope your highness won't blame me. How could Jonathan blame her? However, when he heard the unfamiliar way of addressing him, his eyes darkened. Gu Xingyin sat opposite Prince Jonathan, who personally poured her a drink. Thank you, Gu Xingyin said politely. Her tone was not warm. Prince Jonathan whispered, You don't have to be so polite to me, Miss Leonard. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes and said faintly, Our Leonard family has always been very respectful to the royal family. Prince Jonathan felt a little defeated when he saw how watertight she was. He looked steadily at Gu Xingyin's face and said, Miss Leonard, I know you are very good at painting and music, and you have a deep understanding of classical literature. And these are exactly what I'm best at. Gu Xingyin did not speak. Prince Jonathan continued, A beautiful and gentle lady like you should have a partner who can talk to you about art and life, not Your Highness. Gu Xingyin interrupted him. She looked up with a cold expression. Although I like music and painting, I am also very interested in war and military affairs. Chapter 1534. She stared at Prince Jonathan, and the firmness in her eyes made him speechless. But Jonathan only thought that this was an excuse she made up. Or rather, he subconsciously thought that it was just an excuse. He stared at Gu Xingyin's flawless face with some infatuation and said unwillingly, Diana, you should have belonged to me. Gu Xingyin's expression changed. But before she could say anything, she saw the figure behind Prince Jonathan. In an instant, all her agitated emotions calmed down. She even took back the words she was about to say. This man was here. She believed in him, that he would solve everything. She just needed to feel at ease and enjoy his broad embrace. Prince Jonathan didn't notice Raymond's arrival. He saw that Gu Xingyin didn't speak and thought that her attitude had softened. He was pleasantly surprised. Diana, listen to me, Jonathan. A cold voice came from above his head. Prince Jonathan turned around in shock, only to see Redmond in his military uniform standing behind him coldly. Redmond's sharp eyes were fixed on him. Prince Jonathan panicked for a moment when he met such eyes. But after all, he was a person who had seen countless big battles and quickly calmed down. Raymond, you're here, he said in a calm tone. Raymond glanced at him and suddenly said, After all, Diana is not married yet, and she is not that familiar with your highness. It's better for your highness to call her Miss Leonard. His Highness. Prince Jonathan knew that their friendship had come to an end the moment Redmond called him that. In fact, in Raymond's heart, when Prince Jonathan said those words to Gu Xingyin, his friendship with Prince Jonathan was over. And it was Prince Jonathan who ruined it. If Prince Jonathan really treated Gu Xingyin as a good friend, he wouldn't have asked Gu Xingyin out in private after their relationship had been confirmed and said such ambiguous words. No man could tolerate such a thing. In particular, Gu Xingyin was a special existence to Redmond. Jonathan looked at Raymond, who walked to Diana's side after saying that. Diana, who had always been cold to him, smiled when she saw Redmond. She placed her hand on Redmond's outstretched palm without hesitation and stood up. They looked like a perfect match. This knowledge made Jonathan feel even more indignant. Wasn't he supposed to be the one standing beside her? Perhaps because his gaze was too direct, Raymond finally shifted his attention to him. Your Highness, Deanna has always been my fiancée. Your Highness, please be at ease. Otherwise, it won't look good on both of us. His words were quite straightforward. It was even equivalent to a provocation. My fiancée, you're not allowed to covet her. Gu Xingyin, on the other hand, held Raymond's hand obediently and hid behind him. This attitude of complete dependence also made Prince Jonathan understand that there was really no possibility for him. If she was interested in him, he wouldn't let it go even if he had to offend Raymond. But she didn't have any interest in him, so why should he force himself into a corner? Chapter 1535. Prince Jonathan left. Gu Xingyin looked at the man who was emitting a cold aura and had an "I'm not happy" expression on his face. Are you angry? She asked. Raymond didn't say anything. Gu Xingyin shook her hand that was still held by him and said, Don't be angry. It's not worth it to be angry over someone who has nothing to do with you. Raymond turned his head and saw the little mermaid who was only as tall as his shoulder. She was looking at him with her big blue eyes without blinking. In the gentle eyes of the spring, he could see his own reflection. The annoyance and irritation that had risen in his heart gradually subsided under such comforting words. He held her hand tightly and nodded. You're right, Deanna. It's not worth it to be angry over someone like that. His expression softened, and he leaned over to Gu Xingyin's cheek and planted a gentle kiss. Gu Xingyin looked at Raymond with her eyes wide open. To be able to become the Empire's Prince Charming, in addition to Raymond's status, another important factor was his appearance. This marshal who had conquered countless men and mermaids in the Empire was undoubtedly very handsome. It was just that he always had a cold and unapproachable appearance, which made people feel that there was an unerasable barrier between them. But now, his aura had softened, and even the corners of his mouth were raised, revealing a very faint smile. The barrier disappeared in an instant. The charm of this appearance was finally fully displayed in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin had seen too many beauties. But at this moment, she was still impressed by Raymond, for the gentleness that melted for thousands of miles of ice. Her hand uncontrollably touched Raymond's face and she murmured, You look so good when you smile, Cager. Raymond let her touch his face. He lowered his head and gazed at the little mermaid in front of him. Her eyes were filled with pure love, as if the moonlight had suddenly shone on a peaceful blue lake. It was so bright that he could not take his eyes off her. He couldn't help but move closer to the blue eyes. The gentle touch lingered on her eyes. Gu Xingyin felt a warm breath brushing past her face. Do you like it? From then on, I'll smile for you every day. Fortunately, both of them still remembered that they were outside. This place was not hidden, and with their identities, it was not suitable for them to stay for long without any disguises. Gu Xingyin even saw people pointing at her and Redmond and whispering. Where do you want to go? Raymond asked. Gu Xingyin turned around and smiled at him. Don't you have to go to the military headquarters today? Raymond shook his head. I have plenty of free time. In fact, Raymond's attitude towards work had been regarded as a role model by countless people. With his position, there was no need for him to sit in the military headquarters office every day. There were not many things that could trouble him. Basically, the marshal was only required to attend the regular meetings of the military headquarters. The rest of the time, he was free. It was just that before Gu Xingyin appeared, there had never been anyone or anything that could make Redmond take advantage of this free time. After hearing Raymond's answer, Gu Xingyin tilted her head and thought for a while. Then she said, Then accompany me to meet someone? Raymond did not ask who it was and only nodded. Chapter 1536. But soon he knew who Gu Xingyin was going to see. The address that Gu Xingyin gave was the mermaid prison in the imperial capital. According to Raymond's understanding of Gu Xingyin, the only person who appeared in the mermaid prison and was related to his little mermaid was the mermaid who was detained for attempting to harm Deanna. Her name seemed to be Audrey, but now, Audrey was not just detained. She was sentenced to 13 years in prison and provided the Empire with genetic research samples for free. The former was not a big deal, but the latter punishment was serious. Providing the Empire with research samples for free meant that Audrey would not have freedom for the rest of her life. Even if she was released after serving her sentence, she would only be jumping from a prison without freedom to another prison without freedom. Providing genetic research samples for free and without a time limit. That was to say, Audrey's life would be sold to the Imperial Research Institute. She could not get married. She could not maintain close contact with people. And every part of her body would be used as research material. Mermaids did not have the death penalty. Even those murderers who committed serious crimes would be treated like Audrey after being caught. Obviously, someone was not willing to let Audrey off too easily. Audrey's family had thought of many ways and begged many people, but no one dared to intervene in this matter. Because they all knew who made Audrey like this behind the scenes. That person wanted her to live a life worse than death, and they had no way to change it. The arrival of Marshal Raymond made the warden of the mermaid prison very uneasy. He did not know why this person suddenly came here. Raymond waved his hand and said that his fiancée wanted to see a mermaid, and the warden was relieved. He was really afraid that this person would come for a surprise inspection or something like that. Gu Xingyin saw Audrey in a small room. It was really a small room. Except for a white bed and a tall white cabinet about the waist of an adult, there was nothing else. Audrey was wearing a gray top, sitting on the bed and staring at the wall in a daze. Hearing the movement, she turned around a little sluggishly. Seeing Gu Xingyin's face, her pupils shrank, and then she immediately lowered her head. Obviously, she didn't want her former competitor, she thought, to see her in this state. However, even that glance was enough for Gu Xingyin to see her face clearly. Audrey was a lot more haggard. The face that was always rosy and shiny was now only pale, and her eyebrows drooped because of the imprisonment without freedom. Her long flaxen hair, like seaweed, turned yellow. Audrey's whole person seemed to be old. This old did not refer to her appearance, but spirit. She still looked very young, but when you looked at her, you would not think that this was a mermaid who had just become an adult. It seemed that these few months, these days, Audrey's life. Perhaps the long silence made Audrey a little uneasy. She suddenly looked up and glared at Gu Xingyin. "What are you doing here? Are you here to see me make a fool of myself?" It was only then that she saw the man standing beside Gu Xingyin, shielding her in a protective manner. Audrey's heart shook. She knew him. In the whole empire, there was no one who did not know this man. Chapter 1537. Cager Raymond. A man that was almost mythical. Audrey almost reflexively shrank back. The momentum that she had gathered with great difficulty also disappeared in an instant. In fact, very few people had the courage to face Raymond head-on, including the soldiers of the Empire. Audrey's reaction was not strange. Gu Xingyin looked at Raymond helplessly. How did it feel to have a fiancé who was a winner in life? Gu Xingyin felt very good. However, she still had some things to say to Audrey, so she told Raymond to go out for a while. Raymond was obviously not very willing. He did not want to let Gu Xingyin be alone with a dangerous person. Especially this dangerous person, who had once tried to kill Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin persuaded him in every possible way, and pointed to the room and said that there could not be any dangerous things in it, so Raymond walked out of the door. He also told Gu Xingyin that he would be outside the room, and if there was anything, remember to call for him. Gu Xingyin quickly said yes. Only Gu Xingyin and Audrey were left in the room. Audrey had just seen the interaction between Gu Xingyin and Raymond. She saw Marshal Raymond, who was high and mighty in front of everyone, take a step back for this person in front of her. It seemed that in front of her, he was not the marshal who held the real power in the empire, but just an ordinary man who was willing to make his fiancée happy. How could Diana's life be so smooth? It was precisely because of people like her that others felt indignant. The things that he had painstakingly pursued had been easily obtained by others without any effort. "Are you here to show off?" Audrey asked this question for the second time. Gu Xingyin looked around. She seemed to be looking for a place to sit, but unfortunately, she could not find it. Then she would just stand. Gu Xingyin looked at the haggard woman who still had a trace of hostility in her eyes. She chuckled and said, "If you think I'm here to show off, then so be it." Audrey, who had been emotionless for a long time, suddenly flashed a trace of anger in her heart. Yes, no, no. Deanna, this woman, was completely whetting her appetite. She said coldly, "Are you happy to see me like this?" Gu Xingyin calmly looked at Audrey. She sighed softly and said, "Audrey, I really don't understand why your words are always so sharp. I don't think I've ever offended you." Audrey snorted coldly and did not speak. Gu Xingyin continued, "Just like that time when you asked me to meet you. I originally thought that you really wanted to reconcile with me, and I was very happy. But you pointed your gun at me." Audrey's eyebrows trembled. That was the craziest thing she had ever done in her life. In retrospect, it was really stupid. If she could choose again, she would definitely not do such a thing. So what if she could not marry Prince Jonathan? She could still live a life surrounded by people, and she would meet a man who would take care of her in the future. Instead of sitting in this small room with only one iron window, quietly staring at the sunlight outside for the whole day, she had long regretted it. But it was useless to regret. Unless there was a powerful person who could influence the Supreme Court of the Empire to stand up for her. Chapter 1538. Wait a minute. Someone powerful enough to influence the Empire's highest court? Wasn't there such a person in front of her? Audrey's eyes suddenly lit up. Her eyes shone brightly as she looked at Gu Xingyin, as if she was the savior of the world. "Deanna, I was wrong. I was really wrong. At that time, my mind was muddled. I thought you were going to marry Prince Jonathan. I was momentarily blinded and..." Audrey looked at Gu Xingyin pleadingly. "I really know I was wrong. Deanna, can you forgive me?" She looked at Gu Xingyin without blinking. She had clearly seen Marshal Raymond's eyes when he looked at Deanna. His eyes were filled with love and tenderness. As long as Deanna spoke, Marshal Raymond would definitely not sit by and do nothing. In the entire Queso Empire, there were less than 5 people who could influence the Empire's highest court. Marshal Raymond was obviously one of them. As long as Marshal Raymond wanted to save her, there would be no problem. The key to getting Marshal Raymond to open his mouth was Deanna. Audrey looked at Gu Xingyin with hope. She thought of the Deanna of the past. Kind and naive. Didn't others say that about her? She would definitely help her. However, under her burning gaze, Gu Xingyin shook her head slowly and firmly. Gu Xingyin looked at Audrey and asked, "Audrey, have you ever thought about what would have happened if I didn't fall that night?" Audrey was silent for a moment. Of course she knew. She knew before she fired the gun. The power of the laser beam was too strong. If Deanna's body had encountered it, there would be no chance of luck. Audrey, what position do I have to forgive someone who wanted to take my life?" Gu Xingyin asked. Audrey looked at her like she was looking at a stranger. "But you fell. I didn't hurt you, Deanna. Now I know I was wrong. Aren't you the kindest and most understanding mermaid? Please forgive me this time. I'm sure I won't dare to do it again. I was really wrong." At this moment, even if Audrey was asked to kneel down and beg for mercy, she wouldn't say a word. She felt that she would go crazy if she were to stay in such a prison for such a long time. There was no social interaction. Her daily activities were in this room that could not fit anything other than the bed. Initially, she had accepted her fate and given up. However, when she suddenly saw Gu Xingyin, she was like a drowning person who saw a piece of driftwood. She had to hold on tightly, trying her best to find that slim chance of survival. But no one was a fool. Especially Gu Xingyin. She looked at the crazy Audrey and shook her head in pity. "I can't forgive someone who wants to kill me, Audrey. Besides, have you given up? Even if I forgive you, you won't be able to leave this place." Audrey carefully looked at Gu Xingyin's face. After making sure that there was no possibility of her being shaken, she withdrew the expression on her face. She returned to her previous stupefied expression. She stared at Gu Xingyin mockingly. "It's said that you, Deanna, are the purest and kindest person. I think you're just putting on an act." Gu Xingyin had expected her to be like this. Audrey had such a character. If you couldn't bring her any benefits, she would belittle you to be worthless. Chapter 1539. So Gu Xingyin didn't even bat an eyelid when she heard this. She looked at Audrey and said, "I'm a little soft-hearted." "Audrey, but that doesn't mean I'm stupid. You always think you're the smartest person in the world, but you're the one I can't see through the most." Audrey didn't want to argue with Gu Xingyin. After confirming that she couldn't take her back, she sat back down coldly. She even turned around and didn't want to look at Gu Xingyin. She said coldly, "You're going to be Marshal Raymond's wife soon. You're the winner, and I'm just the loser. So no matter what you say, you'll think you're right." Gu Xingyin saw that Audrey was still stubborn and didn't want to admit defeat, so she knew this conversation wouldn't work out. But she didn't come here to chat. She looked at Audrey and said, "Then just take it that I'm here to announce the good news. Audrey, I'm going to marry Kegel at the end of the year. He loves me very much, and I love him very much. We'll be very happy." Audrey suddenly raised her head and stared at her. "Why are you saying this to me?" She clearly knew that she would be like this for the rest of her life, but she still wanted to show off her happiness in front of her. Gu Xingyin chuckled. "Why? Just take it that I'm here to show off to you. Seeing that you're living so miserably and I'm so happy, I'm really happy in my heart." Although she said this, her tone and expression didn't show any arrogance, so it was hard to tell whether she was telling the truth or not. But Audrey obviously didn't have time to tell the truth. She just kept repeating Gu Xingyin's words in her mind. She was very happy, she was very happy, and she was very miserable. Ah! She suddenly hugged her head and cried out in pain. Almost at the same time, Raymond broke the door and walked to Gu Xingyin's side, subconsciously protecting her in his arms. Then he carefully checked to make sure he was fine. After that he looked at Audrey. He didn't have a good impression of this woman. Seeing Audrey in pain, Raymond just asked casually, "What's wrong with her?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "I just said a few words to her, and she became like this." The doctor and the prison came quickly. After examining Audrey's symptoms, it was determined that she had been overly stimulated and her spirit had become extremely unstable. But the doctor didn't think it had anything to do with Gu. After all, people like them who worked in prison would often encounter one or two mentally ill patients. Most of the time, they're mentals. They've been living in a semi-closed prison for a long. And this discomfort, once a breakthrough is. Audrey's symptoms were the most likely to appear. "What will happen to her?" Gu Xingyin asked. The doctor replied, "If the situation is good, he may be able to recover after a period of rest. If the situation is not good," he looked coldly at Audrey, who was hugging her head and shivering on the bed. "I'm afraid she'll be like this for the rest of her life." Gu Xingyin looked at Audrey, who was sitting on the bed. She was hugging her head with her hands, looking frightened and muttering something. Obviously, her condition was very bad. Chapter 1540. Raymond didn't care about Audrey's life or death. In his eyes, it was fine as long as Deanna was fine. As for Audrey, a person who tried to hurt Deanna, even if she died immediately, Raymond wouldn't feel anything. It was ridiculous that Audrey tried to make Gu Xingyin say good things about her in front of Raymond. She didn't know that the person who wanted her dead more than Gu Xingyin was Raymond. Even if Gu Xingyin was persuaded by her, Raymond might not let her go. Why would Audrey be sentenced to such a severe punishment for murder? Audrey couldn't guess, but Gu Xingyin could faintly guess that Raymond must have something to do with it. "Let's go." Gu Xingyin's hand was held by Raymond. She looked up at him. The matter here was already over. She just asked the system. Audrey really wasn't pretending. She really couldn't bear it and broke down. In this case, there was no need for her to continue to stay here. Raymond tightened his grip on Gu Xingyin's hand. He originally thought that Gu Xingyin would be afraid, but it turned out that his little mermaid was very brave. The two went back from here. Gu Xingyin didn't look back. She knew that she wouldn't come here again in this life. She had dinner with Raymond, and then prepared to send Raymond back. When she returned home, she met the eyes of her 4 family members. It was rare that her second brother Jason was also home. However, compared to the other 3, he was more excited and happy. Seeing Gu Xingyin, he quickly asked, "Did you have a good time with Marshal Raymond? What's he like in private? Is he as cold and unapproachable as usual?" Well, Jason, your sister just came back. Let her rest for a while. Mrs. Casey looked at her youngest son with some helplessness. If Jason was a girl, she was afraid that he would fall in love with his future brother-in-law. Jason only reacted after hearing his mother's words. He smiled a little embarrassedly, quickly pulled Gu Xingyin to sit on the sofa, and politely handed her a plate of cut fruit. Speaking of which, besides Gu Xingyin, among the four of Leonard's family, Jason was the happiest about Gu Xingyin and Raymond being together. His most beloved sister, and the marshal whom he admired the most would become a pair of partners. This was simply a matter that couldn't be any better. Gu Xingyin casually picked two things to tell her family. Leonard's family of four looked at her face. Even if they didn't feel good in their hearts, they still felt relieved. In any case, Marshal Raymond treated Deanna very well. The two of them had a good relationship. There was nothing more delightful than this. The next day, as soon as Gu Xingyin woke up, the communicator rang. Deanna, have you seen the hottest news on the star web? Sophia's tone couldn't hide the excitement in her voice. Gu Xingyin covered her mouth and yawned a little. What's wrong? I just woke up, I haven't seen it yet. Sophia didn't say anything. She just smiled mysteriously. Did you go on a date with General Raymond yesterday? Gu Xingyin was a little confused. How did Sophia know? She casually opened the star web. Then she knew why Sophia knew about this. Chapter 1541. Gu Xingyin looked at the large photo on the front page of Star Web, thinking that not only Sophia, but the entire Queso Empire should know that she went on a date with Raymond yesterday. That photo was of her and Raymond at the plaza in the central city yesterday. After Prince Jonathan left, the two of them spent some time together there. That was probably when the photo was taken. In the large photo at the very top, the handsome man lowered his eyes and carefully held the eyes of the girl in his arms with an extremely cherishing gesture. Such a gesture made the cold atmosphere around him seem to have softened. And the petite girl was held in the man's arms. Only half of her delicate and fair side profile was revealed in the camera. Her beautiful facial contours and long golden fan-like eyelashes could be seen. It was clearly just a candid photo, but the atmosphere between the two of them was so harmonious and beautiful. Gu Xingyin looked at the photo with appreciation for a while, and found that she was very satisfied. The photographer's skill was pretty good. She continued to scroll down and saw a few more photos. She raised her head slightly and reached out to touch Raymond's face. Raymond, who never allowed others to step into his territory, indulged the girl's behavior almost to the point of indulgence. There was also the way the two of them interlocked fingers, and the way Raymond personally bought a drink and handed it to her. Gu Xingyin looked and couldn't help but laugh. So this was how it was when she interacted with him? She continued to scroll down and saw the netizens' comments. Daylily, holy shit, it's blinding my dog eyes. This definitely isn't the Honorable Marshal Raymond I know. Blue, I agree with the previous poster. This definitely isn't the Honorable Marshal Raymond I know. Blue and white porcelain. This is the rumored tempered finger softness, right? It looks so blissful. The sofa is mine. So the Honorable Marshal also has such a gentle appearance. The interaction between the two is so warm. The Marshal really dotes on his wife. A cup of water is not water. Although this photo is beautiful, the angle of the photo is bad. Can you let me see the Marshal's wife's complete appearance? Although it's only half of her face, I seem to see a peerless beauty. Lick screen a beauty in my arms. Absolute beauty +1. Also the person above, good luck to you. How dare you lick the beauty of the Marshal's wife? Scoundrels like us can only look up. A roll of toilet paper. Admiring the beauty of the Marshal's wife. In addition, light a candle for the screen licking above. Ha 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 ha. Gu Xingyin flipped through a few pages with great interest. As expected, Raymond's popularity was not just for show. The message had only been posted for less than half an hour, but there were already more than 100,000 comments. What kind of terrifying speed was this? No wonder he was called the nation's Prince Charming. Hey Deanna, are you still there? Sophia's voice came from the other end of the communicator. Gu Xingyin replied. Yes, I'm reading the news you mentioned. Speaking of this, Sophia became excited. My God, let me tell you, Deanna, Your family's Marshal Raymond is really too handsome. A cold, domineering, and aloof Prince Charming is actually so gentle and doting on you. Oh my God, just thinking about it makes my heart melt. You don't know Gu Xingyin listened to Sophia's long speech helplessly. She knew that this girl could talk for 10 minutes if she was in a good mood. She even took the opportunity to wash up. When she came back, Sophia was still talking. Chapter 1542. Let me tell you, Deanna, you have to keep an eye on your family's Prince Charming Raymond. You didn't see the comments below. Even though you know he has a fiancé, there are still a lot of merfolk who are willing to give birth to his children. Sophia was obviously very excited. Gu Xingyin timely interrupted. Don't worry, Sophia. I'm confident that he'll only love me. Sophia didn't say anything for a long time after hearing her words. After a long while she said, I'm convinced. Deanna, you've changed too. Now you open your mouth and spread dog food. My fragile little heart can't take it anymore. Gu Xingyin laughed. I have to teach Earl Allen these words. Sophia instantly fell silent. After a while Sophia said, Say Marshal Raymond should also know about this, right? I wonder what his reaction will be if he finds out he's been photographed. Gu Xingyin thought to herself, he'll probably be very happy. She understood this man. He should be eager to announce their relationship to the entire empire in a high-profile manner, to tell everyone that she belonged to him. No matter how many worlds he had experienced, his possessiveness had never changed. Moreover, take today's photos as an example. Without Raymond's permission, the Star Web would never dare to put up their photos without his permission. It was just that she couldn't say these words to Sophia. She could only vaguely reply, I don't know. Sophia was obviously dissatisfied with this answer, but with her understanding of Gu Xingyin, she probably knew that she had just woken up. You're up and go eat early. See you at school this afternoon. The two of them were already adults. There was still one semester left in the merfolk school. Gu Xingyin had been staying at home ever since she was injured because of Audrey. No matter what, she had to go to school today. Okay, see you this afternoon. Gu Xingyin walked downstairs. Her parents and eldest brother were all there. Only her second brother was nowhere to be seen. He had obviously gone to the army. The three of them sat at the dining table and looked at Gu Xingyin with a hesitant expression. Gu Xingyin picked up the milk product and took a sip. If you have anything to ask, just say it. Cough. Mrs. Casey was the first to speak. She looked at her daughter. Yesterday, you went to the shopping mall in the city center with Marshal Raymond? Gu Xingyin put down the cup in his hand and looked at her helplessly. Mom, don't be so careful. I saw the news. It's true. A smile appeared on Mrs. Cassie's face. Anyone could see the deep affection between the two from the photos. They could also see the tenderness and care General Raymond had for the girl in his arms. Mrs. Casey had to admit that even though she was a mother of 3 children, she couldn't help but feel her heart fluttering when she saw those photos. She thought that at this moment, all the unmarried mermaids in the empire were probably wishing that she was the happy girl in Marshal Raymond's arms. Her impression of Marshal Raymond had also improved qualitatively in an instant. He had a good family background, he was capable, he was handsome, and he cherished Deanna so much. What was there to be picky about with such a son-in-law? Even the other 2 men in the family who were originally dissatisfied with Raymond were completely speechless. 40 chapters. Please recommend it. Chapter 1543. Mermaid School. A hover car stopped here. Today was the end of the school's monthly holiday. Naturally, many mermaids would be sent to school by their families. Uncle Jack was sitting in his small recliner, squinting his eyes leisurely in the sun. Suddenly, he noticed that the hairs on his body were standing on end. This was the sign of encountering a top expert. Uncle Jack pretended that nothing had happened and turned his head to take a look. However, this glance stunned him. Under an ordinary-looking hover car, the man who came out was a face that no one in the empire would be unfamiliar with. Raymond got out of the car and personally opened the door for Gu Xingyin. In fact, with current technology, the door could be opened automatically. But Raymond liked this kind of etiquette, which originated from the ancient Blue Star era. He felt that this could better reflect the importance he attached to his fiancée. Uncle Jack looked at the mermaid who came out of the car. Oh, it was Deanna, who often greeted him and loved to smile. Right, she seemed to be Marshall Raymond's fiancée. Old Jack continued to lie back, slowly thinking about the news he had seen a few days ago. It was said that the Raymond family had been preparing for a long time. They would wait until Deanna graduated, and then the two would get married. Due to the school rules of the mermaid school, Raymond did not enter the school. Old Jack could hear that he was telling the little mermaid something. Old Jack smiled knowingly. Young people, they had just been together, and it was inevitable that they would be reluctant to part. He could completely understand. Didn't he and the old woman go through the same thing in the past? Raymond finished what he was going to tell them. He leaned over and gently planted a kiss on Gu Xingyin's forehead. I'll pick you up at the end of the month. Since the news, the Leonard family had completely accepted this son-in-law, and Raymond had basically taken over the matter of picking up and sending Gu Xingyin. This could also be regarded as cultivating feelings. Then old Jack heard the girl's cheerful voice. Grandpa Jack, good afternoon. Old Jack smiled and waved at her, watching the girl's figure walk away. He inadvertently turned around and saw the marshal standing quietly at the school gate. His eyes were fixed on the white figure. It seemed that he would not leave until the person disappeared from his sight. Raymond seemed to have noticed old Jack's gaze as he glanced at him. He didn't say anything and only nodded slightly. Old Jack only grinned. A girl who was polite and kind would always have good luck. Old Jack mumbled to himself. Deanna and the marshal would be very happy. Time passed quickly. The days at the mermaid school were no different from usual. If there was a difference, it was that everyone knew that this was the last time they would be together. When the students met, they would smile at each other and occasionally have a meal together. Their relationship was much better than before. There were also some who were more mature and had already begun to learn how to socialize within the family. For example, Gu Xingyin, the wife of the future marshal, became the target that everyone wanted to curry favor with. Gu Xingyin felt a little sad about this change, but she knew that it was unavoidable. With her status, there was no need for her to consider so many things. It was better for them to continue their relationship as usual. For those who were only acquaintances, it was still better to be indifferent to them. Chapter 1544. The Mermaid School. The teachers watched as the students said goodbye to them one by one. They had been here for many years. After a while, they would have to go through such a farewell. It was a cycle. Although they were used to it, they still couldn't hide their sadness when it came to such a moment. After Gu Xingyin said goodbye to all her teachers, classmates and friends, she walked to the man standing behind her. This day was the only time that outsiders were allowed to enter the school. The robots had already packed up everything and went home. Gu Xingyin only needed to leave with Raymond. Voices could be heard from behind him. Quite a few people had already recognized Redmond. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but sigh. With a fiancé like you, I really don't feel safe. I'm going to become the love rival of the whole empire. Raymond shook her hand, apparently amused by her words. He lowered his head, and his warm breath entered her ear. You have no love rival, Deanna. My heart will always beat for you. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but twitch her ears. She looked behind her and saw two mermaids looking at her with red faces. For a moment, she couldn't help but feel proud. So what if they were the love rivals of the empire? No matter how many people were jealous, they could only watch. Raymond looked at Gu Xingyin with a smile. She didn't hide her expression at all. He could easily see through her thoughts at the moment. It was obvious that her thoughts pleased him. The next step was to send Gu Xingyin home. When they got out of the car, Raymond suddenly grabbed Gu Xingyin's hand. Gu Xingyin looked at him with some confusion. Raymond looked at her deeply, his eyes full of joy. Deanna, my little mermaid. Very soon, you will become mine. Gu Xingyin knew what he meant. According to the agreement between the two families, their wedding should begin soon. The Raymond family and the Leonard family. One had power, the other had money. The combination of these two families was the wedding of the century. The eager citizens of the empire finally saw the bride's full face on the live broadcast of the Star Web. As a result, The comments below changed from "Lucky Mermaid Marshall, I'm willing to give birth to your child," to a large wave of "Beautiful mermaids are all other people's. Marshall Raymond is so lucky. The angelic Marshall's wife." Interspersed with the comments. After the wedding, the live broadcast site actually received millions of comments. There were even people of the Imperium who were arguing over whether the Marshal was lucky or the Marshal's wife was lucky. The flames of war were much fiercer than the fights between the fans of the Empire's stars. However, none of this affected Raymond and Gu Xingyin. Raymond held Gu Xingyin's hand firmly and placed a resplendent gemstone ring on her finger. "I hope to use this ring to encircle you for the rest of your life," he said softly in her ear. Gu Xingyin smiled and didn't say anything. She also took the ring in her hand and firmly put it on Raymond's finger. Then, she motioned for Raymond to lower his head. Raymond obediently did as he was told. Then Gu Xingyin tiptoed and whispered the same thing into his ear. "I'm greedy. I hope to use this ring to encircle you for the rest of your life." Chapter 1545. Ever since he was born, Dinok Raymond had been favored by the heavens. He was the heir of the Raymond family. His father was the leader of the Casso Empire's military. His mother was from the richest family in the capital, the Leonard family. Needless to say, since Dinok was born, his physical attributes could be said to be perfect. Plus, he had inherited all the good points of his parents. Anyone who saw Dinok for the first time would say that he was like an angel from the ancient Blue Planet's records. But Dinok always had a little secret in his heart. He felt that his father didn't like him. Why? Every time his mother wanted to hug and kiss him, his father would stand up and sternly say, "The men of the Raymond family can't be coquettish. They can't be spoiled." Actually, he really liked his mother's soft and fragrant hugs. Little Dinok felt wronged. One day, he climbed up the fake mountain in the family's garden to think about life. Then he accidentally fell asleep. He didn't know that his disappearance had turned the entire Raymond family upside down. He saw the family's servants looking for him in a hurry. And his father, who was always calm and indifferent, had a rare anxious expression on his face. He was worried about him. Dinok suddenly felt warm in his heart. Then he climbed out of the fake mountain. If time could turn back, little Dinok swore that he would never climb out before his mother came home. Because when his worried father saw him, the anxiety on his face disappeared and was replaced with his usual coldness. The little guy instinctively felt that something was wrong and wanted to run. But how could he outrun his father? Dinok's but blossomed. When Gu Xingyin came back at night, Dinok had already cried himself to sleep. In a daze, he seemed to hear his parents talking. "Such a small child. How could you be so cruel?" The gentle voice was his mother's, but it had a trace of complaint. Then his father's voice sounded. It was different from the coldness of the day. When talking to his mother, his father's voice was always very gentle. "Deanna, I can't be lax with Dinok. He is the eldest son of the Raymond family. In the future, he'll have to shoulder the entire Redmond family. He'll have to hold up the sky for his mother. He'll have to protect his younger siblings from the storm. And he'll also have to deal with the conflicts and threats from the outside world. If we spoil him now, we'll be harming him in the future." His mother's low voice could be heard. "I know, but such a small child. I feel uncomfortable just looking at him." Her father's calm voice seemed to be comforting her. "Our son can do it. Dinok is my pride and joy. He is also the child that I have poured my heart and soul into teaching. He has never let me down. He will be the strongest man in the Empire in the future." Dinok didn't hear the rest of the sentence clearly as he fell asleep again. However, the stone that had been pressing down on his heart all this time suddenly disappeared. He was his father's pride and his mother's protection. So it wasn't that his father didn't like him. As Dinok fell into a deep slumber, he couldn't help but smile. He dreamed that he had become the most powerful man in the Empire, even more powerful than his father. He would become the pillar of the Raymond family, just as his father had hoped. Chapter 1546. This was a story that couldn't be more ridiculous. The original owner, Zhong Yuji, lived in a very happy family. Her family was rich, but her parents' relationship was very good. They didn't have the disputes of other rich families. Zhong Yuji graduated from a famous university. She had a boyfriend with a good family background. Her boyfriend was very good to her. Zhong Yuji used herself as an example to tell others what it meant to be a winner in life. However, a car accident tore off all the concealment. Her mother's bones were not cold yet, and her father couldn't wait to bring a woman home. That woman also brought a daughter who was the same age as Zhong Yuji. And one. Zhong Yuji couldn't accept that her mother had just passed away for less than a month, and her father was preparing to remarry. She made a big fuss at home, but her father, who always loved her, scolded her. The woman who was brought home had a gentle temperament. She always stood softly by the side and never interfered in the matters between the father and daughter. And that one, like her mother, just stood on the side quietly. This attitude made her father feel that his daughter, who he had carefully raised, was actually so vulgar. This was not the biggest blow to Zhong Yuji. The most desperate thing was that once she woke up late and didn't go out. She just happened to hear her father and that woman talking. And one was the child of that woman and her father. What husband and wife love, the model of a rich family, it was all a joke. Her father, since they got married, loved someone else. He even had a child with another woman not long after he and her mother got married. She couldn't hold back and stood out to question them. In the end, her father only felt a little unnatural. After that, he said that he wanted one to acknowledge her ancestors. He actually wanted to acknowledge that illegitimate daughter. No, perhaps in his heart, this illegitimate daughter, was even more precious than his own daughter? Zhong Yuji ran out angrily. At this time, the only person she could think of was her boyfriend, Zhong Cheng. But when she drove to Zhong Cheng's apartment, what she saw was him hugging and kissing another woman. Gu Xingyi knew that woman. She was her good sister and her mother stole her mother's husband, and now, she came to steal her boyfriend. Zhong Yuji didn't even have the strength to question them. She leaned on the steering wheel and cried. But she didn't expect that a drunk driver would rush over. When Zhong Yuji died, she was still in a daze. This time, those B***cheese were really lucky. She couldn't accept it. Gu Xingyin silently looked at the plot of this world. She was simply disgusted. This world was simply a concentration camp for scums. Regardless of whether it was the two-faced father, the mother and daughter who entered the house, or Zhong Cheng who cheated on his girlfriend. All of them were the best. She scanned her surroundings and found herself in an elegantly decorated room. He was wearing pajamas and had a slight headache. It should be the aftereffects of sleeping late. She looked at the time. It was 9:30 in the morning. Gu Xingyin rubbed his forehead and dragged his sore body to the bathroom. After washing up, he felt much more refreshed. She raised her head, looked at the girl. Chapter 1547. She had a good appearance and temperament. But she looked a little pale. Gu Xingyin compared Zhong Yuji's memory. Her mother had just left, and her father brought someone else back. She didn't have a good rest during this time. No wonder she looked so pale. She tidied herself up, pushed the door open and walked out. Yen, you know that Rua just left. If I announce your and Wenwen's identity at this time. The woman standing in front of her father was obviously crying. But I followed you for no reason. I've been here for so many years. But what about Wenwen? She'll be laughed at by others. Gu Xingyin sneered in her heart. Now you know you'll be laughed at by others? Aren't you and your mother a joke for a long time? Then she heard her father's comforting voice. Yen, don't worry. Wenwen is my daughter. I won't let her be wronged. In the original plot, Zhong Yuji couldn't help but rush over to question the two when she heard this. But Gu Xingyin thought that Gu Xingyin was making a scene now. It was not a good thing for her. She recorded this quietly, and then went back to her room. After a while, she walked out of the room again. This time, she saw the two people sitting on the sofa in the living room politely. Yuji, you didn't go out today? Father Chong asked. After graduation, Chong Yuji opened a fashion design studio with several of her friends. Usually she would go there at this time. Gu Xingyin answered. I don't feel well. I won't go today. At this time, the woman sitting aside didn't speak. She called Yuji weakly. Gu Xingyin pretended she didn't hear it. She raised her wrist and looked at the watch. She said to Father Chong, "I'll go out first." Father Chong didn't know what he wanted to prove in front of that woman. His face suddenly darkened. "Your auntie is greeting you. Chong Yuji, where's your upbringing?" Gu Xingyin's face also turned cold. "I don't remember my mother having any siblings. Where did this aunt come from?" She tilted her head and looked at the woman sitting on the sofa who seemed to be at a loss. "My mother hasn't even passed away for 100 days, and you can't wait to welcome such a person into the house. I don't care if you want to raise this plaything, but if you want me to treat it respectfully like an elder, no way." Her expression was filled with endless resentment. "She's just a shameless woman. Who does she think she is?" The blood drained from An Yan's face after hearing those words. In fact, she had seen Chong Yuji's mother many years ago. At that time, Chong Yuji's mother was still a high and mighty young lady. She lived wantonly and ostentatiously. When she saw Chong Yuji, she also looked at her with disdain. Now more than 20 years had passed, and her daughter was still looking at her with the same gaze. Her fingernails dug into her palms as she told herself to endure. She had endured for more than 20 years. What did she rely on to stay with Chong Minggang all the time? Wasn't she gentle and considerate? Now she finally killed Chong Minggang's first wife. Wasn't she just a spoiled young lady in her 20s? She could still trample her under her feet. Chapter 1548. So she didn't say anything when she heard that. She just sat on the sofa with a pale face and cried silently. In Chong Minggang's eyes, this made his heart ache. In his heart, this woman had been a mistress for more than 20 years. Now that his wife had died, he wanted to take her back. What was wrong with that? Why did Yuji become like this? Didn't she understand his difficulties as a father at all? But Chong Minggang had never thought about how much he had done to his deceased wife and innocent daughter. How much he had gone overboard. He glared at Gu Xingyin and said, "What are you talking about? Why don't you apologize to Auntie Yin?" Gu Xingyin knew that Chong Minggang didn't dare to do anything to Zhong Yuji. Zhong Yuji's mother, Lu Qinghe, was the daughter of the Lu family. The Lu family was more powerful than the Chongming family in the capital. He couldn't wait to take An Yan and her daughter back after Lu Qinghe died. This already made the Lu family very unhappy. If there were rumors that he treated Zhong Yuji badly, the Lu family would make trouble. Gu Xingyin knew this, so she directly talked to An Yan. She just wanted to let this woman know that even if she married into the Zhong family, so what? She couldn't get what she shouldn't get. Gu Xingyin slowly tidied up her hair and said to her father, "Father, if you don't want me to say something worse, don't provoke me. I will never be able to live in peace with this woman." After saying that, she walked out of the door, completely ignoring how angry her father was behind her. To say something unfilial, that kind of man wouldn't shed a tear even if he was angered to death. After Gu Xingyin left, An Yan covered her mouth and burst into tears as if she could not hold it in any longer. Women like her knew what kind of crying could make a man pity her the most. Sure enough, her father quickly began to comfort her. "An Yan, don't be sad. Yuji has been spoiled by me and her mother since she was young. She has a bad temper. Don't take her words seriously." An Yan sneered in her heart, but her face was full of sorrow. "I really didn't know. Yuji, she actually hates me so much. Otherwise, I'd just move back." Although she said this, she was certain that Chong Minggang would definitely not agree. If she really moved out, wouldn't it mean that he, the head of the family, actually compromised with his daughter? For a man like Chong Minggang who cared a lot about his reputation, this was absolutely intolerable. As expected, Chong Minggang immediately got angry. "Don't mention this again. Don't worry, An Yan, with me here, no one will dare to make you leave this house." An Yan was so touched that she snuggled into his arms. Gu Xingyin didn't even let the system monitor what happened after that. She didn't even need to think to know what the two of them would talk about. She didn't want the system to tell her anything to disgust her. She didn't go to her own fashion design studio. Instead, she drove to her boyfriend Zhong Cheng's apartment. Zhong Yuji and Zhong Cheng could be considered as close friends. They were recognized as a golden couple. In the eyes of outsiders, Zhongqing loved his girlfriend Zhong Yuji like a treasure. Like a treasure? He loved his girlfriend like a treasure, but in the blink of an eye, he was with another woman? Gu Xingyin sneered. And one was her mission target. But she never thought that this woman would be a threat to her, because she still had a big secret in her hands. Chapter 1549. The big secret was that Anwen wasn't Zhong Minggang's daughter at all. To be honest, Gu Xingyin was shocked when she knew about it. Zhong Minggang treated the mother and daughter as his treasures, and was touched that Anwen stayed outside for more than 20 years for him, and raised his daughter alone. But he didn't know that Anwen had already cheated on him more than 20 years ago. In the original plot, after Zhong Yuji died in a car accident, the Liu family couldn't take it anymore and directly went to question Zhong Minggang. At that time they expressed their doubts about Anwen's identity, and Zhong Minggang naturally denied it. But the Liu family had always been tough, and they directly dragged Anwen to do a paternity test. The result was completely out of everyone's expectations. Anwen and Anwen were not related. When Gu Xingyin saw this, she was even curious about the expression on Zhong Minggang's face at that time. She always thought that the lover who treated her with all his heart actually had an affair with someone else long ago, and even the child wasn't hers. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but laugh. No matter what, she was happy as long as this kind of person was unhappy. Soon, they arrived at Zhongcheng's apartment. As a typical rich second generation, Zhongcheng's apartment was located in a high-end residential area in the city. Gu Xingyin parked the car by the side and walked towards the destination. Before she arrived downstairs, she saw the young man and woman who were pulling each other. The two seemed to be arguing about something. The woman was more emotional, and the man was softly coaxing something. Anyone who saw it would think that this was a young couple who was at odds with each other, not a man with a fiancé and his fiancé's illegitimate sister. Gu Xingyin continued to walk forward as if she didn't see it. Zhongcheng and Anwen were both emotional and didn't notice her at all. When Gu Xingyin was almost beside the two of them, Anwen said something and Zhongcheng pulled her into his arms and kissed her passionately. Gu Xingyin saw this scene and stopped to think for a while. Fortunately, Zhongcheng had always been the one who took the initiative in the relationship between Zhong Yuji and Zhongcheng. Zhong Yuji didn't even know whether she was more dependent on him or more in love with him. The two of them hadn't reached the final step yet. Otherwise, Gu Xingyin herself would feel disgusted at the thought of such a man. Anwen resisted at first, but after struggling for a while, she went completely limp in Zhongcheng's arms. Seeing that she was finally appeased, Zhongcheng finally breathed a sigh of relief. He raised his head and was about to say something to Anwen when he sensed that something was wrong. They turned around and saw that Gu Xingyin was looking at them with a faint smile on his face, only 4 or 5 steps away from them. Yuji? Why was she here? Zhongcheng's heart skipped a beat. He then saw that Gu Xingyin was playing with a mobile phone. She had even taken a picture of him, and Anwen's actions. Seeing Gu Xingyin like this, Zhongcheng was a little flustered. When he saw that he was still hugging Anwen, he quickly pushed her away as if he was scalded. Anwen was pushed so suddenly that she almost fell to the ground. Zhongcheng, what are you doing? Anwen couldn't help complaining. When she raised her head, she saw that Zhongcheng was looking at a certain direction anxiously. She raised her head subconsciously and saw the woman she hated most in her life. Chapter 1550. Zhong Yuji. If someone gave Anwen a gun to let her kill a person without any criminal responsibility, there was no doubt that she would shoot Zhong Yuji. From the moment she entered the Zhong family, Zhong Yuji had never looked her in the eye. She always looked at Anwen with a sneer in her eyes. She looked at Anwen as if she was looking at a bug that couldn't be exposed to the light. Anwen was flustered when she saw Zhong Yuji, but after the reflexive panic passed, she calmed down and even felt a little secret complacency. Look, your boyfriend was in my arms just now. She wanted to see Zhong Yuji's arrogant face being torn apart. At the thought of this, she slowly straightened her body and still had the strength to tidy up her messy hair. She called out to Gu Xingyin in a gentle voice. Gu Xingyin didn't pay attention to her at all. She just looked at Zhongcheng with a sneer. Don't you want to explain? Seeing that she was ignored, And one was so angry that she gritted her teeth. You are so cruel. Zhong Yuji, one day, I will tear your arrogant face into pieces by myself. Zhong Cheng was flustered in his heart. He had known Zhong Yuji for so many years. It would be a lie to say that he had no feelings for her. Besides, after so many years, even if it was fake, he had pretended to be sincere. Besides, Zhong Yuji had a good family background, a good appearance and a good temperament. In all aspects, she was much better than An, who wanted to stay with her mother. Without hesitation he blurted out, Yuji, believe me. I've been blinded by greed all this time. I just played with her. The one I like is still you. An, who was also waiting for his answer, almost broke her teeth when she heard that. Played. It turned out that in Zhong Cheng's heart, those sweet words and intimate interactions were just for fun? Her eyes became cold. Sure enough, her mother was right. Men were all cheap bones. What they said could never be taken seriously. Her expression was noticed by Gu Xingyin, who noticed it from the corner of her eye. She looked at Zhong Cheng without batting an eyelid. Play. Hearing her tone, Zhong Cheng thought that she was still hesitating. At this moment, he only wanted to please Gu Xingyin and make her believe his words. It was not easy to find such a good girlfriend. Chong Yuji was Chong Minggang's only daughter. If there were no accidents in the future, the Chong family's business would be hers. Moreover, her grandfather was from the Liu family. If the Zhong family could get the support of the Liu family in the future. Thinking about how the Chong family had grown in just a few decades, Zhong Cheng's heart burned with passion. He definitely had to coax Yuji. Thinking of this, Zhong Cheng hurriedly nodded. That's right, Yuji. You know that I've always only had you in my heart. I'm really just playing with her. Think about it. How can an unpresentable daughter of a mistress be compared to you? Gu Xingyin looked at Wen's pale face with satisfaction. This feeling isn't bad, right? An, the man who tried so hard to snatch from me only treated you as a plaything to play with. She was too lazy to tear it up herself, because she knew that someone would tear it up for her. Gu Xingyin, who had seen enough of the drama, withdrew her gaze and looked at Zhong Cheng, who was looking at her with expectation. Under Zhong Cheng's gaze, she said slowly, Oh, you're just playing with her. What does that have to do with me? Chapter 1551. Gu Xingyin coldly looked at Zhong Cheng, who was looking at her in disbelief. She smiled coldly. Whether you really love her or play with her, what does it have to do with me? Zhong Cheng felt bad. He still wanted to say something to save the situation, but Gu Xingyin didn't want to give him another chance. Zhong Cheng, do you think that after I see this kind of thing, you can easily apologize and this matter will be over? Gu Xingyin stared at his face with sarcasm. Zhong Cheng, I'm not so cheap. After saying that, she turned around and looked at An, who was standing aside obediently with her head down. This woman should be secretly happy when she heard what she said just now, right? Gu Xingyin looked at her impatiently. And you, An, your mother is shameless to be the third party in other people's marriage. As a daughter, you have got the essence of her and come to steal my boyfriend. She took 2 steps toward An. Under her aggressive momentum, An couldn't help but take 2 steps back. Gu Xingyin saw this and stopped. However, An, do you really think that Zhong Cheng will marry you in the future after being with you? Don't be too naive. Sometimes a person should know her own identity. What the Zhong family needs is a daughter-in-law who can help their family to a higher level, not a... Gu Xingyin looked at her from head to toe and smiled ambiguously. You don't even know your father, a burden. And Wen's face turned pale. She suddenly raised her head and stared at Gu Xingyin. She stared at her and said, Shut up. Zhong Yuji, shut up. The problem of her birth had always been her pain. She didn't know who her father was since she was a child. When she was a child, she also asked her mother, and even resented her. But no matter what, she couldn't escape that she was born out of wedlock and didn't even have a father. Seeing her like this, Gu Xingyin really didn't continue. She turned her head to look at Zhong Cheng, who was standing motionlessly at the side, and sneered, Look, this is the man you've found. Even if I trample you to death here, believe it or not, he won't have the guts to come out and stop me. And Wen's mouth moved, but she couldn't refute. Yes, if she had a conflict with Zhong Yuji now, according to what Zhong Cheng said just now, it was hard to say who he would help. And Wen suddenly felt powerless. However, Gu Xingyin glanced at the two of them and said, "However, I'm in a good mood today. I wish you all the best. May you be infertile and have many children and grandchildren." After she finished speaking, she did not pay any attention to the two people behind her who were dumbstruck and resentful, and slowly left. No one noticed that in a car not far from here, someone had seen this scene from beginning to end. The man looked at the back of the leaving figure, and then looked at the two people who were standing there awkwardly. "I remember that second brother seems to have a cooperation with the Zhong family?" His face was hidden in the shadow, so it couldn't be seen clearly. But judging from the voice, the owner of the voice was very young. Another person in the car answered, "Yes, third master." He didn't speak again, and the black car left quietly. And Wen took the lead to break the silence between the two people. She thought for a while and felt that since she had offended Zhong Yuji, she couldn't leave Zhong Cheng behind. Chapter 1552. And Wen stammered as she looked at Zhong Cheng. Her eyes were filled with endless grievances. Zhong Cheng. Zhong Cheng had been standing there in a daze. Only now did he come back to his senses. He looked at Wen who was approaching him, and he couldn't help but take 2 steps back. The way he looked at Wen was as if he was looking at something dirty. "Don't come over." He looked at Wen with disgust. "Tell me, did you do it on purpose? Did you deliberately approach me to destroy the relationship between Yuji and me?" Zhong Cheng regretted it very much. If he had known earlier, he would have held back before Wen approached him. No matter what, he couldn't cause any trouble before he got married. He knew about the Chong family. Of course, he also knew about Wen's identity. Originally, he didn't like Wen at all in his heart, but this woman was sensible and had a gentle personality. She could satisfy his masculine desires very well. In this aspect, Zhong Yuji, who had always grown up like a rich young lady, couldn't compare. Therefore, Zhong Cheng thought that since Yuji didn't know, he would play with Wen. When they were about to get married, he would break up with her. However, he didn't know that there was a kind of woman who couldn't be broken up with when you wanted to. Moreover, Wen's purpose was not simply to be a mistress who couldn't see the light of day. Wen looked at Zhong Cheng in disbelief. It was as if at this moment, she really saw Zhong Cheng's true colors. Although she had some thoughts of seducing this man to get close to him. However, this kind of thing couldn't be done with a slap. When nothing happened, he was obedient to her. However, when Zhong Yuji came, he threw all the responsibility to her. Listening to the meaning of Zhong Cheng's words, he wanted to cut ties with her. How could there be such a beautiful thing in the world? Wen sneered in her heart, but on the surface she pretended to be helpless. Tears rolled down from her pale face. Hearing Zhong Cheng's words, she couldn't help shaking her head. "No. It's not like that. I've never thought of coming between you and elder sister Yuji." Wen cried and said, "I know my identity and I know that it's impossible for me to marry you. I just want to stay by your side. Zhong Cheng, I love you. Even if I don't have a status, I'm willing to be with you." Zhong Cheng looked at Wen suspiciously, but he couldn't tell that she was lying. Such a delicate and pretty beauty was crying in front of him. Yet she didn't forget to confess to him. No man would be able to harden his heart. Not to mention Zhong Cheng, who had an ambiguous relationship with Wen. Zhong Cheng's expression finally eased. However, he still said, "Let's not be together anymore." He looked at Wen's widened eyes and felt bad for her. However, when he thought about how Heavy Rain had left in a rage, he felt that he should know what was important. "You know, I've loved Yuji for so many years, and I've always treated her as my future wife. I can't let go of her." Wen was dumbfounded by these words. This man said that he was deeply in love with Heavy Rain, but behind her back, he kept having all kinds of lovers. Was this the so-called love? Although Wen hated Heavy Rain, at this moment, she actually had a trace of sympathy for her in her heart. "Look, your boyfriend is such a scumbag." If Gu Xingyin knew her thoughts, she would definitely correct her. "No, please pay attention to your words. That scumbag is not my boyfriend anymore. Don't push all the blame on me." 50 chapters. Begging for votes. Chapter 1553. Gu Xingyin wandered outside for a day. When she returned home, she found Zhongcheng sitting on the sofa and chatting enthusiastically with Chong Minggang. Chong Minggang had a smile on his face. He was obviously very satisfied with Zhongcheng. Seeing Gu Xingyin return, Chong Minggang acted as if nothing had happened in the morning. He said, "You child, Zhongcheng is already here. Why didn't you come back earlier to accompany your boyfriend?" Gu Xingyin glanced at Zhongcheng's face. It seemed that Zhongcheng didn't tell Chong Minggang about that matter at all. She really didn't understand this man's thoughts. Could it be that he was so naive to think that there was still a possibility between them? Gu Xingyin looked at Yan, who was busy at the side. She poured herself a glass of water and said, "I forgot to tell Dad that Zhongcheng and I broke up." When Chong Minggang heard this, his smile disappeared. He frowned and said, "What happened?" He turned to look at Zhongcheng. Zhongcheng's expression was a little awkward. He said to Chong Minggang, "There's some misunderstanding between Yuji and me." Chong Minggang wasn't stupid. Looking at this, he knew that something must have happened to Zhongcheng. However, he had always been quite satisfied with Zhongcheng, this prospective son-in-law. The Zhong family had a good background and had many collaborations with the Zhong family in some fields. If the two families could unite by marriage, it would be a good thing for both of them. Gu Xingyin slowly sat down on another sofa. "Please pay attention to your words, Mr. Zhongcheng. There's no misunderstanding between us. I saw it clearly with my own eyes." Chong Minggang felt that his daughter's attitude was a little aggressive. He said unhappily, "Yuji, it's normal for young couples to have small problems. Look at Zhongcheng's good attitude. You should try to talk to him. There's nothing that can't be solved." Gu Xingyin placed the cup in her hand heavily on the glass coffee table. She looked at Chong Minggang with a mocking expression. "Father, aren't you going to ask me why I broke up with him? Or should I say that no matter what he did to me, as long as he is the young master of the Zhong family, I have to forgive him and then rob him of a happy marriage?" She finally knew that there were some people that you didn't have to give them any face at all. Otherwise, they would really be able to whitewash the situation and pretend that nothing had happened. Chong Minggang felt that his daughter had been going overboard recently. In the past, Yuji was not so rebellious. His face darkened. "Is this how you talk to your father?" Unfortunately, Gu Xingyin was not afraid of him at all. She smiled and said, "Do you know what I saw when I went out to look for him today?" She reached out and pointed at Zhongcheng. Zhong Minggang looked at Zhongcheng suspiciously. He still understood his daughter. If it wasn't something that she couldn't tolerate, her reaction wouldn't be so big. Gu Xingyin's tone was nonchalant. "My boyfriend and that woman and one are locked in a kiss." Zhongcheng was completely embarrassed. He forced a smile and said, "Yuji, we don't have to do this here. Please call me Miss Chong." Gu Xingyin interrupted him. "Don't make it seem like we're very familiar with each other." Chong Minggang's face also turned green and white. If it was an ordinary affair, it would be fine, but the object of the affair was in one. Chapter 1554. Chong Minggang knew how much Gu Xingyin disliked the Yin family's mother and daughter. No wonder she had such a big reaction. This Zhongcheng was really something. He clearly knew that N1 was Yuji's sister in name, but he couldn't help but glare at Zhongcheng. Zhongcheng smiled bitterly. He knew that in this world, there was no father who could tolerate his daughter being treated like this. That was why he came early today, hoping to leave a good impression in Chong Minggang's heart. However, if Gu Xingyin didn't cooperate, nothing could be discussed. Gu Xingyin felt that this man was really despicable. She had already said it so clearly, but Zhongcheng could still act like this. This man, didn't he know how to write the word shame? Taking a step back, even if Zhongcheng was shameless and dared to appear in the Zhong family, Gu Xingyin didn't have the time to waste on him. She stood up directly. "I'll say it again. You and I are over. There's no possibility. Don't come to the Zhong family anymore. I feel disgusted just looking at you." Zhongcheng's expression became very ugly. He felt that he had already put down his face and dignity to beg Gu Xingyin for forgiveness. But this woman really didn't give him any face at all. She even embarrassed him in front of his uncle. Chong Minggang also felt that his daughter's words were a bit too much. Yuji! He shouted her name loudly, indicating for Gu Xingyin to restrain herself. Gu Xingyin ignored him and turned to look at Zhongcheng. Do you find my words unpleasant? Then you have two choices. First, get lost from my side. I won't be able to see you, so I'll be in a good mood and won't scold you. Second, go find your gentle and win lover, right? For a woman like her, no matter what you do, she will still love you tenderly. She glanced at Yen, who had been cleaning the stairs, and sneered. Mother and daughter are the same. They don't feel comfortable if they don't seduce other people's men. You. Chong Minggang was furious. He raised his hand high, as if he wanted to slap her. Gu Xingyin was not afraid at all. Father, you find my words unpleasant and want to teach me a lesson? I didn't say a single word of falsehood from beginning to end. How long had it been since his mother left and this woman had already entered the Zhong family? If you want to hit me, fine, hit me with all your might. I'm going to my uncle's house tomorrow. I'll let them see how you beat your own daughter for a shameless mistress and a wild child who seduced my boyfriend. Chong Minggang was so angry that his face turned green. He was so angry that he panted a few times before he said anxiously, "Get out of here." Gu Xingyin left without another word. He really thought that she was willing to stay here. Zhongcheng watched the entire show from beginning to end. Listening to Gu Xingyin's resentful words, he realized for the first time that Yuji had such a huge grudge against Madame and her daughter. In the past, Yuji would never say this in front of her boyfriend. He always thought that she simply hated them. Now it seemed that it was more than hate. It was obvious that she hated them to the core. So because he cheated on N1, Yuji had such a big reaction, right? If he stayed away from Madame and her daughter from now on, Yuji would see his true feelings. If Gu Xingyin knew what he was thinking, she would probably laugh countless times. Was this man so good at deceiving himself? Chapter 1555. Her words couldn't be any clearer. But Zhongcheng was still able to find an excuse for himself. Of course, Zhongcheng wouldn't let her go. Everyone knew that the head of the Zhong family, Zhong Minggang, was already in his 50s. He only had one daughter, Zhong Yuji. It was almost impossible for there to be any accidents. Everything in the Zhong family would be Zhong Yuji. If an ordinary person married her, they would have at least a few decades less to struggle. And Zhongcheng on the surface was the only heir of the Zhong family, but his father had no less than 4 illegitimate children outside. Each and every one of them was very powerful. If he couldn't find a strong wife, his position as the heir of the Zhong family might not be stable. So even if he was a little shameless now, he had to try his best to coax Gu Xingyin back. But he underestimated Gu Xingyin, or rather, he underestimated women. Not all women were able to forgive their boyfriends for the sake of love after they cheated on them. This wasn't love, this was foolishness. Zhong Minggang looked at Zhongcheng and felt a little uncomfortable. After all, he was disobeyed by his daughter just now. It was really embarrassing to be seen by an outsider. Zhongcheng also felt that he had lost face in front of his future father-in-law, and was now embarrassed. Then Uncle Zhong, I'll disturb you another day. Zhong Minggang regained the attitude of a kind elder and nodded at him. Yuji has been spoiled by me. It's inevitable that she has a bad temper. Please forgive her. Zhongcheng hurriedly said no. The two of them exchanged a few words before Zhongcheng left the Zhong family. After Zhongcheng left, Zhong Minggang's face darkened. He waited for Yen, who was standing by the stairs, and snorted coldly. Seducing her own sister's boyfriend. This is the good daughter you raised. Although Zhong Minggang contacted Yen and her daughter, he knew the severity of the matter. He knew the identity of the Yin family's mother and daughter. It was fine if he brought them back and treated them better. But even if he and Yen got together in the future and recognized N1 as his daughter, N1 could only be his recognized daughter. She could never be his daughter. Otherwise, he had no way to explain why N1 was only a month younger than Yuji. An illegitimate daughter was a month younger than the legal wife. Everyone could guess the story behind this. If the Lu family found out that she had an affair with someone else before marriage, thinking about that family's usual style, Zhou Minggang's expression became even uglier. Not to mention, Lu Qinghe, who had passed away, owned nearly 30% of the shares of the Chong family. As for those shares, when she died, she left them all to her only daughter. Now Zhong Yuji was the biggest shareholder of the Zhong family group. He only had 25%. If he fell out with Yuji, apart from his identity as a father, he didn't have any advantages at all. The more he thought about it, the more upset he felt. He couldn't do anything to Zhong Yuji, so he could only vent his dissatisfaction on Yen. Yen was now in her 40s, but she took good care of herself. All these years, Zhong Minggang had never mistreated her in terms of money, so she looked like she was in her 30s. When she heard Zhong Minggang's question, her heart ached. She was not without resentment. She followed Chong Minggang when she was young. At that time, this man had said that he needed the power of the Lu family, so he had to marry Lu Qinghe, but he still loved her. When everything stabilized, he would divorce Lu Qinghe and marry her. Because of this sentence, she had waited for him for more than 20 years. Chapter 1556. She had been with this man for more than 20 years without any status. She had been looked at strangely by the people around her. Her daughter had cried and asked her why she didn't have a father when she was young. She had endured it. She had endured for more than half of her life. And finally Lu Qinghe had died. She thought that she had finally seen the light, but she didn't expect that she had entered the Zhong family. But as a mistress who couldn't be seen by others, her Wenwen had also entered the Zhong family, but she couldn't become Zhong Minggang's daughter. If this was the only result, why did she wait for more than 20 years? To put it bluntly, after more than 20 years, no matter how deep the feelings were, they were almost gone now. What Yen wanted now was not the illusory and unreliable love. What she wanted was real, something that could bring her status and benefits. But if she was in such an awkward situation now, if something happened to Zhong Minggang in the future, the Zhong family's property would completely belong to Zhong Yuji alone. It had nothing to do with her, a mistress with no status, and Wenwen an outsider. How could Yen accept such a result? At this moment, Zhong Minggang was angry in front of his daughter, but he vented all his anger on her. It wasn't the first time Yen felt the difference in status. If she was Chong Minggang's official wife, she would be able to use her words and actions to obtain the respect she deserved. But she wasn't. She was just a mistress with no status. She couldn't anger Zhong Minggang, because she might be kicked out of the house by the angry man. Once he reached such a state, he would truly have nothing left. So she could only endure and face the blame with a smile. And Yen told herself that she had endured for more than 20 years. Now that Lu Qinghe had died because of her, what else couldn't she endure? Zhong Yuji, so what if she was the eldest daughter of the Zhong family? She was just a young and aggressive girl. She was now using her status and Zhong Minggang's indulgence to throw a tantrum. When she became Zhong's wife, Yan's eyes flashed with coldness. She had 100 ways to make her suffer without knowing what the problem was. Seeing Yan's submissive manner, Zhong Minggang also realized that his tone wasn't very good. After all, she was a woman who had suffered outside for more than 20 years because of him. Moreover, Chong Minggang still had some feelings for Yen. He pulled Yen up and said with a sigh, "Don't blame me. I was just angry. Tell me, Wenwen clearly knows that Zhongcheng is Yuji's boyfriend. Why would she do such a thing?" Yen knew that Zhongcheng, the eldest son of the Zhong group, was a very rare rich husband. Her Wenwen couldn't even ask for a good marriage, but it was abandoned by heavy rain like a worn-out shoe. Yen closed her eyes and leaned on Zhong Minggang. She said tentatively, "I think Mr. Zhong seems to like Wenwen. Since Yuji doesn't like her, how about?" There was a long silence. Yen opened her eyes uneasily and met Chong Minggang's inquisitive gaze. She forced a smile and said, "What's wrong, Minggang?" The smile on Chong Minggang's face disappeared. He lowered his eyes. "Yen, I remember telling you that even if I bring you and your daughter back, Wenwen and Yuji will still be different." Chapter 1557. And Yan's face was a little pale. But Chong Minggang didn't pity her this time. Instead, he cruelly tore off the veil. I can give one a good life, and even take her as my adopted daughter. But you have to know that she will never be the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. And Yan looked up, and tears fell from her eyes. This time, she wasn't pretending. Why? Wan is also your daughter, isn't she? She asked in a hoarse voice. Chong Minggang looked away. You should have known this since you started following me around 20 years ago when you didn't have a proper status. Yuji can choose not to marry the eldest son of the Zhong family. She is the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. Without Zhongcheng, she can choose other rich young masters. But in Yan, Chong Minggang said directly to in Yan, Wan can't. Even if Yuji doesn't want to be with Zhongcheng, the Zhong family can't let their son marry an illegitimate daughter. Calling her an illegitimate daughter sounded good, and Wen's situation was even worse than an illegitimate daughter. In the eyes of others, she was just a burden brought by in Yan. Neither of them noticed that at the entrance, and Wan, who had just returned, was covering her mouth tightly and listening to their conversation with tears in her eyes. She originally thought that after she entered the Zhong family, her mother could become the madam of the Zhong family, and she could also become the eldest daughter of the Zhong family. So she wanted to be on the same level as Zhong Yuji. She even thought that Zhong Yuji was a brainless woman. She just had an extra noble birth. She never thought that she was worse than Zhong Yuji. Until now, her biological father directly told her mother that she could never be the real eldest daughter of the Zhong family in this life. She couldn't be compared to Zhong Yuji in this life. She didn't deserve any man that Zhong Yuji didn't want. And Wan didn't listen anymore. She turned around and ran out. That night, Chong Minggang's two daughters didn't come home. However, their circumstances were completely different. Gu Xingyin said goodbye to her two good friends in the design studio, then decisively took her bag and went to her uncle's house. Anyway, the main force of that studio was Zhong Yuji's two friends who studied design. She was just the one who invested. On the other hand, and Wan spent the entire night alone in the bar. Gu Xingyin's arrival was welcomed by her uncle's family. Chong Yuji's grandfather Lu Qingshan had 3 sons and 1 daughter. Lu Qinghe was his youngest and only daughter. The entire Lu family spoiled Lu Qing, he so much that she had a character of not going back on her word. So back then, Lu Qinghe didn't agree to her being with Chong Minggang, but Lu Qinghe still insisted. The Lu family had no choice but to try their best to help their son-in-law with his career, so that their daughter could live a better life. After his daughter passed away, his only granddaughter naturally became Lu Qingshan's treasure. Grandpa's little you, what brings you here today? Lu Qingshan, who was already in his 70s, asked with a smile while leaning on his walking stick. If it was the old Chong Yuji, in order not to let Grandpa and Uncle's family worry about her, she would keep it to herself. But she didn't know that her behavior made the Lu family feel that she had a good life at home. Although they were very dissatisfied with Chong Minggang, they couldn't say anything for the sake of their granddaughter. Gu Xingyin wasn't the kind of person who would suffer losses silently. Chapter 1558. If she didn't show it in front of her family members who really cared about her, who would know? Therefore, as soon as her grandfather asked this, Gu Xingyin's eyes immediately turned red. She didn't cry, but this forced appearance of wanting to cry made people feel even more sorry for her. In particular, the Lu family had always known that Zhong Yuji's character was very strong. They had never seen her cry more than a few times since she was a child. What's wrong with Yuji? Before Lu Qingshan could speak, his eldest daughter-in-law, Zhong Yuji's eldest aunt, asked very sadly. Speaking of the Lu family, it was strange. Lu Qingshan's 3 sons were all born with boys. In the 3rd generation, there was not a single girl. Other families were worried about not having a male heir, but their family was the only one who wanted to give birth to a female child. But it was a pity that Lu Qingshan had no hope of having a granddaughter. He could only wait and see if he could look forward to having a great-granddaughter. Lu Qinghe was very homesick. When she was alive, she would bring Zhong Yuji back to the Lu family almost every month. Zhong Yuji's uncles and aunts could be said to have watched her grow up, so naturally, They felt very sorry for her. Gu Xingyin listened to her eldest aunt's words, and her heart ached. She slowly told her what had happened during this period of time. In particular, she mentioned that she heard her father say that An was her biological daughter, and that An and her boyfriend, Zhong Sheng, were together. After hearing the last part, the faces of several people in the living room turned cold. It's simply too much. Lu Qingshan slammed his crutch on the ground twice. His gaze turned to Gu Xingyin's face, and his anger turned into heartache. You child, such a big thing. Why didn't you tell us? Zhong Yuji lowered her head and covered her face. I didn't know. I didn't want to trouble myself, and I didn't know what to do. Eldest aunt looked at her like this, and her heart ached. She walked over and gently hugged Gu Xingyin into her arms. Don't be sad. Uncle, auntie, and grandfather all love you dearly. There's no need to mention that ungrateful father of yours. Eldest aunt's family was in the military, so her words and actions were much more straightforward than the average person. Lu Qingshan looked at his granddaughter's lowered head, and was silent for a moment. He looked at his eldest son, who was also angry. Go call your brothers back. He lived with his eldest son. His other two sons were in the capital, but they didn't live together. Gu Xingyin's uncle, Lu Jingzhang, knew that his father was really angry. Not to mention his father. Even he wanted to rush to the Chong family and beat him up when he found out that Chong Minggang was such a trash. He actually had a daughter before marrying her younger sister. He had pretended to be affectionate for more than 20 years, and everyone had been fooled by him. Lu Jingzhang felt a fire burning in his heart as he thought about it. This was too much. Without another word, he called his two younger brothers. He didn't say what the matter was. He just said that it was urgent and asked them to come back. Lu Qingshan started from scratch and built the huge Lu group alone. He retired at the age of 60 and handed the family business to his eldest son, Lu Jingzhang, and his second son, Lu Jinghui. His third son, Lu Jingqi, had no interest in business and chose to join the military. Now he had made a name for himself. The people of the Lu family were not easy to bully. After receiving the call from their eldest brother, although they didn't know what had happened, the two brothers of the Lu family rushed back as soon as possible. Chapter 1559. The three brothers of the Lu family each had their own prospects. They were not at all like those other families, who fought to the death for the sake of property. When Lu Jinghui and Lu Jingqi came, they brought their wives because they didn't know what was going on. The two brothers arrived almost at the same time. Big brother, what's the matter? Third brother Lu Jingqi was a straightforward person. He asked as soon as he came in. Lu Jingzhang didn't say anything. It was Gu Xingyin's first aunt who told him what happened just now. Outrageous. Lu Jingqi's face was livid. When little sister chose Chong Minggang, I didn't agree. That guy was scheming, but Qinghe just had to jump into his trap. Someone bumped into his elbow. He turned around and found that it was his wife. Gu Xingyin's third aunt looked at her husband with disappointment. Her niece was still here? How could he scold her father in front of others? Lu Jingqi was used to being reckless outside. He was a henpecked husband. He really touched his nose and didn't say anything. Lu Qingshan saw that the whole family was here. He then looked at Gu Xingyin. Yuji, no matter what happens today, your three uncles and I will definitely stand up for you. The people of our Lu family cannot be casually bullied by others. But, he looked at Gu Xingyin. There's something you need to decide. Gu Xingyin looked up. The corners of her eyes were a little red. Please say it. Lu Qingshan's voice was very steady. The key is, what kind of result do you want? Did he just want to chase out the restless mother and daughter? Or do you want to get rid of all the threats in the future? Gu Xingyin was shocked. She didn't expect that her grandfather would plan so deeply for her. She asked in a hoarse voice, the latter. What do you mean? Lu Qingshan's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but feel satisfied. His grandson's character was very strong. Thinking of his son-in-law who was always respectful to him, a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes. Get rid of all the threats. That is, naturally, to let your father retire at home in peace. His words were vague, but everyone present understood what he meant. He wanted to remove Chong Minggong's influence in the Chong group and cut off his power. After all, Zhong Yuji held the most shares in Chong's group. She might be weak by herself, but if she had the support of the Liu family, it would not be difficult for her to go against Zhong Minggang. The Liu family had helped the Chong family to rise because of Liu Qinghe. Now they could take the Chong group back from Chong Minggang for Chong Yuji. Gu Xingyin was silent for a long time before she nodded gently. Liu Qingshan's eyes flashed with praise, but he asked, "Have you thought it through? If you want the second option, then your father-daughter relationship with Chong Minggang will be completely gone." Gu Xingyin's lips curled into a helpless smile. Given my father's current state, if I were to force An and her mother away, would there still be any affection left between us? No, I don't know how much father-daughter relationship there is between my father and me. Several people in the Liu family thought of the existence of An and her mother, and they couldn't help but be silent. Yes, a man who had a true love soon after he got married. How much sincerity could he have for his wife and child? Chapter 1560. In the end, Liu Qingshan made a decision. All right, since it's the latter, we need to make some preparations. Yuji, you can stay at home for the time being. It's fine if you don't go back to the Zhong family. Gu Xingyin nodded. That was exactly what she was thinking. When she went back, she would have to see the mother and daughter's pretentious faces. It was simply unbearable. The Liu family was very good to her. Why should she go back and look for trouble? That night, Gu Xingyin slept very comfortably. When she woke up the next morning, she saw 2 missed calls on her phone. It was from Zhong Minggang. Gu Xingyin glanced at it casually and didn't plan to pick it up. But just as she was about to go out, her phone rang again. She picked it up. Hello. Zhong Minggang's angry voice came through. Where did you go? Why didn't you tell me you were coming back? Gu Xingyin sneered. Didn't you tell me to get lost? I'm at Grandpa's house now. I don't plan to go back for the time being. After saying that, she hung up and set the phone to silent mode. Zhong Minggang heard the busy tone on the other side, and was so angry that he almost threw the phone in his hand. He looked at An on the sofa. This woman was drunk. Not only did she reek of alcohol, but her clothes were also torn. A string of red marks could be seen from her neck to her collarbone. One could imagine how intense the battle last night was. Zhong Minggang was about to go to work early in the morning, when he saw An like this outside the door. God knows how much he wanted to throw this woman out in an instant. She went out alone in the middle of the night, drunk, and had a one-night stand with someone else. Was this something that his daughter could do? No girl with self-respect would do such a thing. Zhong Minggang immediately thought of his eldest daughter, who also didn't come back for the night. He was more worried about this. And An was fine. She was an illegitimate daughter anyway. Not many people knew about it. But Zhong Yuji was different. If Zhong Yuji did such a thing and was photographed, the Zhong family's reputation would be ruined. Therefore, he immediately called Gu Xingyin. When he heard Gu Xingyin say that she was in the Liu family, his first reaction was to heave a sigh of relief. His second reaction was displeasure. Just like all successful men who relied on their wives to get to where they were, Chong Minggang was a little dissatisfied with his in-laws. It was a taboo for his business rivals to say that he relied on women to get to where he was today. His unhappiness reached its peak after Gu Xingyin hung up on him. He wanted to scold his increasingly rude daughter, but Gu Xingyin didn't give him the chance. Therefore, Chong Ming held back his anger, and became even more dissatisfied when he saw An lying drunk on the sofa. Just as An Yen came downstairs, Chong Minggang found a way to vent his anger. Look at your daughter. What kind of bad habits did she pick up outside? Don't you know how to educate people? An Yen woke up early in the morning to be scolded like this. By the time she reacted, Chong Minggang had already driven out. An Yen hurried to her daughter's side. She knew what happened when she saw her daughter's expression. She was anxious and angry, but she couldn't do anything. Madam An, your breakfast is on the table. A servant reminded her. An Yen felt that those servants must be laughing at her behind her back at this moment. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.